Hi, I'm Patrick Hauser, and I'm here today speaking with Valentine Palmer, who is an internationally known actor and voice coach known as the Voice Man. And we're here to explore his relationship with Doctor Who. So tell me, Valentine, how did you end up in Doctor Who?
Well, how I ended up in Doctor Who is really quite surprising, actually, because I was never terribly interested in Doctor Who, I have to confess. I wasn't one of those kids who hid behind the sofa, you know, when the Daleks came out. And then, very early in my acting career, one day, my agent rings up and says, "Do you want to be in Doctor Who?" And I said, "Doctor Who? I don't know anything about it." He said, "But you do watch it, don't you?" I said, "No, I've never seen it." So I was not terribly interested. I said, "What's the money?" He told me the money. I said, "Yeah, when do I start?" So away I went. That's how I got into Doctor Who. And in fact, of course, once I was in it, I got drawn into the whole thing and got fascinated by it. And the story was quite exciting. And the doctor I worked with was Jon Pertwee. And Jon Pertwee was a very eccentric kind of actor. I mean, brilliant. But actually, most of the really good doctors have been slightly eccentric people like Jon Pertwee and Tom Baker. So that's how I got into Doctor Who. It's very surprising. I never expected to be in it. Oh, and the interesting thing was that I never saw my episodes, because as soon as I'd finished filming, I had to go abroad to Spain to run a theatre, can you believe? So it was years and years and years until I actually saw myself in Doctor Who. And what happened was, because, you know, once you've been in Doctor Who, you get fan mail. Doesn't matter how many episodes, doesn't matter how big or small your part, you get fan mail. And so over all these years, I've got fan mail coming in, a letter or two every month from all over the world. And one fan sent me, not so long ago, the new digitally remastered version on a DVD. And I was able to play it and see myself. So that's how I got into Doctor Who, and that's how I've kind of stayed remotely involved ever since.
So tell me, why do you think Doctor Who has been so successful?
Doctor Who must be the BBC's biggest success ever. Must certainly be their biggest money spinner. I mean, for 50 years it's been going, and it's been shown in goodness knows how many countries all over the world. And I mean, I'm so lucky. Do you know, it's about 40 years since I was in it, can you believe? And I still get these little checks come. The BBC actually send me these little checks, for very small amounts, for repeat fees from all over the world. You know, I get £3.50 check from the 14th showing in Namibia or something, and there's a stamp on it, and there's all the administrative work that's gone into preparing the account and sending me the check. But you know, so it's not the biggest money spinner in my life, but it's got to be the biggest money spinner that the BBC's ever had. And isn't it interesting? Why would a story about an eccentric doctor who's a Time Lord, whatever that is, and has been going for, what, hundreds of years maybe? Series may have been gone 50, but the Time Lord Doctor Who has probably been going for 1,000 years for all we know. Why would that be so popular? The public love escapism. The public like to be taken away from their everyday life, which for many of them may be boring or whatever. Maybe that's what it is. It's escapism. I mean, look how popular science fiction is, and this is science fiction. But it's got something else added to it. It seems to appeal to children of all ages, from like 6 to 90. It's got a universal appeal, and no one, certainly not me, has ever been able to put their finger on exactly what makes it so appealing. But it's to do with being taken to another world. And each episode, we're taken to a different world. That's the trick. And I think that's why it's so successful.
So Valentine, with tens of millions of Doctor Who fans, tell us, what is it like to have been in Doctor Who? 3, 2, 1.
So what's it like being in Doctor Who? Well, I mean, it's being taken to another world. Doctor Who is about another world. There's nothing in Doctor Who that's realistic. not the doctor, not anybody, not any of the locations. It's all a bit strange. So when you get involved in it, it's all a bit strange. And I played, in my episodes, somebody who comes back from the future to the present to change the present and so save the future. Complicated, I know. Sounds a bit like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator, doesn't it? But that's what it was. And it was very interesting. And working with John Pertwee, who was the doctor, it was really, really fascinating because it was incredibly professional. And in order to appear very eccentric and strange on camera in the episode, he was very, very disciplined, very, very focused. It was very interesting working with him. He was a real pro. Alas, no more. Greatly missed. So, yeah, it was terrific being in Doctor Who, especially that strange thing that I'd never watched it until I was in it and then had to go abroad and didn't see it again for years. So there you are. Being in Doctor Who. Great fun. I wouldn't mind doing it again, actually, but nobody's asked me.
I've heard there's some interesting connections between you and Doctor Who. Tell us more. 3, 2, 1.
So what was the question? This is the last. Oh, would I like to be a time? Yeah. Well, what is a Time Lord? People talk about Doctor Who being a Time Lord, but what exactly is a Time Lord? Okay, it's to do with time. He moves through time, and every time we come to a new story, he's in a different place, maybe a different world, and a different time. And I think it would be absolutely wonderful, to be able to move around in time. There are certain periods in history that I find really interesting. I got to think about 1900. I'd like to be in Paris in 1900. I mean, you had the Impressionists, and we were getting first motor cars, first aeroplanes shortly after that. We were getting the invention of penicillin. It was an amazing time. So I'd like to be in France in the year 1900, but I don't want to be stuck there, because I kind of like the 21st century with all the health and communication benefits that we have now. But I'd like to be able to sort of dodge around like that. Be wonderful. Better than being invisible, in fact. For me, Harry Potter wants to be invisible. I just want to move from one century to the other.
I've heard there's some interesting connections between you and Doctor Who. Tell us more.
Yes, there are some interesting connections between myself and Doctor Who. All right, I was in it many, many years ago, but the connection continues. Because what happens over the years, about once a year or so, I get asked to go to some Doctor Who convention or Doctor Who gathering and sign photographs of me in Doctor Who, which is very nice. And people actually queue up and chat to me, and they all seem to know about the episodes that I was in years ago, and they're all a quarter of my age. So that's quite fun to meet a whole huge place full of Doctor Who fans, and who many of them seem to know all about my episodes, which is just great. But what happened to me in November 2011, I'm at a big Doctor Who convention, and I'm signing my name on photographs of me in Doctor Who. And then the guy who's running it gets talking to me, guy's running the event. And I mention the Titanic, because at that time we're just a few months away from the date in 2012, which is the 100th anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic. And I mentioned that my great uncle was the senior surviving officer and had a lot to do with the investigation into the sinking, and wrote a book about it. And he said, this guy, well, why don't you write a book about it? I said, oh, really? He said, yeah, because as well as putting on these shows, we actually publish interesting books by celebrities and television actors. So I got a commission to write this book. And this was in November 2011, and he wanted it delivered by March 2012. And I said, but that's just round the corner. And he said, well, we'll pay you. So I said, oh, well, okay. So I put everything aside, and I spent 3 or 4 months just researching and writing this book about my great uncle on the Titanic, the only senior officer to survive. So I got really interested in the Titanic, and I discovered all sorts of fascinating things. One of the things I discovered in my researches was the connection with Doctor Who. That's why I'm saying this, because, the Titanic has featured over and over again in Doctor Who episodes. I think Sylvester McCoy, who was once the Doctor, he was in an episode where he is in the ship when it hits an iceberg. Christopher Ellison, who I think was the 9th Doctor, he's in an episode about the Titanic. In fact, I think he ends up clinging to an iceberg. It's mentioned several times, but I tell you what's really interesting was that David Tennant and Kylie Minogue appeared in a Christmas special, Christmas 2007, the Doctor Who special film for Christmas, watched by 7, 8, 9 million people on Christmas Day, in which they were on the Titanic, but it was an intergalactic spaceship, and everybody loved it except a woman called Milvina Dean. And Milvina Dean was the last survivor to still be alive from the sinking of the Titanic, the last survivor to be alive. And she said that she thought it was sacrilege to make a spaceship out of this wonderful doomed ship that all these people had died on. Well, there you are. You see, you can't please everybody, can you?